the poor producer.
There you go.
Producer, director. This messed me up. Okay. Again, the whole idea of Easter has nothing to do with the Passover in reality. Easter comes from austere, the goddess, as I said earlier. But I want to say something else. And I want you to hear me very, very clearly. And I want you to challenge everything I say at this point, okay? We were talking about racism, right?
Yes.
No one believed in Christianity. Well, let me put it this way. People who believe in Christianity now only believe in Christianity for the most part, not totally, but for the most part, because they were forced to.
I can believe that.
What happened, Catholicism, the Catholics began to kill people who did not accept Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to preserve cultures, races, etc., people began to pass the belief in Christianity on down, pass it down to their children. So Christianity was not a voluntary belief. And as unpopular as the truth of it is, Christianity did not come into play in the form that we see it now until the Catholics began to establish themselves as the curators of all religious etiquette. They began to develop what they felt was the right theological concept, but all of it played into what they wanted to project. It was all about manipulation and control. And what the desire to control was, it was not so much a desire to control people, but it was a desire to control wealth. And they did it under the guise of Christianity. Now, it doesn't faze me that people are upset by it. The truth usually upset folks, but that's the reality. It was all about wealth, and right now there is a strong projection of poverty in Catholicism. The nuns, the priests take a vow of poverty, mm-hmm. and none of them are poor. None of them lives in poverty unless they choose to. None of them. The wealthiest institution is the Catholic Church, but yet the people who adhere to the principles are poverty-stricken all over the world. So I have been very, very hesitant about dealing with it from that perspective, because I know that there are people who hold so dear to it. Now, the other thing about that I want to say concerning this is this: that the people who the most spiritual in this country are African Americans, and the reason I separate the concept of Christianity from the scriptures is because 99.9% of what people project to be Christianity is not scripture based.
Right.
It is not scripture based, and I know there will be challenges to that, and I welcome them. As a matter of fact, I want them, because the whole idea of accepting the concept of Christianity is also the idea of accepting slavery, because slavery was justified by Christianity, and conquest was justified by Christianity. So when you look at it, look at it from this perspective. How many of you have heard of the Papal States? When Eastern Europe was under the control of the Pope. And that was up until World War II, I believe, when all that changed. And all of that was about the Catholics ruling, actually in an attempt to rule the world, basically. And now it has shifted. Instead of doing it overtly, it's being done covertly. And one of the organizations that's doing it covertly is Opus Dei. And I know that there are people probably watching this broadcast and say that, well, what that has to do with spirituality? Everything. Because the whole idea of what's in the scriptures was shifted based upon the ideas of Catholicism and the whims of the Pope and the College of Cardinals and the bishops. Those are the ones who pushed us in this direction that most of the world who believe in Christianity is going now. And when I talk about the concept of the covert control through Opus Dei, is if you look at whether it be Santorium or Pat Buchanan, when you look at them, they are connected to Opus Dei.
And what is Opus Dei again?
Opus Dei is a Catholic organization that is supposed to be designed to perpetuate the morals of Christianity, but has very little to do with politics. But they do believe that your political policies will be shaped by your moral beliefs. Mm. And that's just another way of saying Catholicism will shape your policies. Mm. So when we look at that, it is to the advantage of Catholicism to keep people at odds with each other. It's almost a divide and conquer thing, and it's a quiet movement. If you were, and I don't want to get into this, but if you were to go into the National Archives and begin to read about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and then follow it back to Ohio, to Illinois rather, before he became president, you'd be amazed at what you find in terms of the connection to Catholicism. You'd be amazed at what you find. So there are a lot of things that, and then the other part of it is the whole idea of Nazis being able to escape from Germany into South America was via the Vatican. The paperwork was done in the Vatican. So there's a whole what? There has to be a total paradigm shift when we look at this, the idea of Christianity, because it is a very, very violent religion. The roots of it is very, very violent. And yes, sir.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you know anything about this? I can't remember his name at the moment. I'm a little tired here, but he's the son of an evangelical. It begins with an S. It's not Schuler. It's something else. He's written a series of books, and it seems like there's a resurgence a bit of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. You know, when the split up of the Roman Empire was pre-Pope, very different direction. Very different. Self-determination, a lot of that sort of stuff. So it's still alive, present, and it seems as if, at least from his point of view, he's actually gone back to how that's what Christianity, when you went away from the Jerusalem church anyway, into the West, that's what the real tradition of Christianity is, which means you can go into any church on any Sunday and everyone's in the same place, in the same liturgy, saying the same prayer, as opposed to somebody playing a banjo, somebody doing this, that, everything else, which is even in the Catholic, what we call the Catholic Church now. So I just didn't know if you're...
No, I haven't.
Okay.
But I would be interested in reading it, most definitely.
Well, there's a long YouTube presentation that he gave at the invitation of one of the Orthodox church groups that's up in New England or New York or something.
Okay.
It's a very interesting presentation that he's given. But it's not him. I mean, it's. Right. I think there's something there that we don't pay any attention to, but it's still alive, and it is sort of people returning to a more traditional route.
I think the resurgence has a lot to do with the shift that's taking place in terms of the 2012 idea. I do believe that the preservation of the scriptures, as erroneous as they were translated into the King James Version or English, was necessary, because if they had not been manipulated, they would have been destroyed. Everything that could not be manipulated was destroyed. And so I think that, I don't think, I know, that the mysteries concerning how things are supposed to be are hidden in plain sight. And the containers that hides them in plain sight are the Hebrew letters, or the meanings of the Hebrew and Aramaic language, the linguistic structure rather of the Aramaic and the Hebrew that has hidden the mysteries of how the world was made. And that world, I don't mean world in terms of Christianity, but talking about how the universe, I should say maybe, was constructed. And I mean, the whole idea, if you look at Christianity from the biblical perspective, and you begin to see that in the scriptures, if you were not married, you couldn't be a rabbi. But on the Catholicism, after what was Pope Pius, I believe it was, when marriage with the priest came to a halt, they were supposed to be married to the church. You know? And there has been tremendous scandal throughout the history of that church. But because of the surreptitious manner in which they manipulate society, it is very difficult to get the word out on a broad scale as to what's actually going on. And you would be tarred and feathered and branded sacrilegious if you were to stand in settings and make a statement such as have been made that Jesus was actually crucified on Thursday and the resurrection is supposed to take place on Saturday evening as opposed to Friday and Sunday. And this whole concept of Lent comes from Catholicism. And I remember when I was a little boy, the Baptist and Methodist churches didn't touch it. Now, as far as the United Methodist, I don't know, because I didn't know there was a United Methodist Church until I was grown. The only thing I knew was CMEs and AMEs. That's all I knew. But they didn't touch it. And the reason they didn't is because of that. And I also remember when I was a little boy, I was kind of rambunctious, you know. And my mama said that in order for me to be disciplined, that she was going to send me to Catholic school. My grandmama told me, no, he's not going to Catholic school. It's not going to happen because of the Pope. Because she said stuff like, the Pope, he ain't God. But that's the attitude. So, and I don't think for a moment that she had an in-depth understanding of it, but she had a sense that it was not right. And that's what they had been taught. And as a result of that, I didn't end up in a Catholic school. I probably would have ended up in some Jesuit college, university, had I gone. But that's neither here nor there at this point. So anyway, if you look at the concept of separation, it has always been perpetuated by Christianity. Look at Ireland. I remember in college I had to do a paper, and I did it on Northern Ireland, and talked about the battle. Most people did not understand that the battle was between Protestants and Catholics. It was not Christians and Muslims. Very rarely they talked about the Protestants and Catholics. They said that it was a battle that the Protestants were fighting the Christians about beliefs, but they never really got into it. And it simply was because the Catholics controlled everything, and the Protestants were being pushed out of the economic system and being treated as social rejects. So there's always been this sense of division in the traditional Christian setting, and I think that our approach to it has always been an uninformed approach. What we've tried to do, and when I say we, I'm talking about people who recognize the dangers in it and recognize the inequality of it, and it wanted to throw all of it out, as opposed to trying to understand it and understand the origins of the belief systems that we had incorporated into our lives. And when you begin to understand the belief systems that we incorporate in our lives, and then you begin to look into the scriptures and see where concept actually came from, then you begin to see it differently than what was projected, early on. Any questions? Or any more questions, I should say. Is that it for me? No questions. Okay. So, since we started talking about this idea of Passover, let me show you some other things, how separation takes place. You've heard the concept, the most segregated hour is 11 o'clock Sunday morning in America. The separation also takes place not only by denominations, but separation is also perpetuated internally, regardless of what belief system you employ. If it's the Baptist or Methodist Presbyterian, doesn't matter. There is also a perpetuation of separation within the denominational settings. When you look at it, you have your rural churches versus your inner city churches. You have within the church itself, individual churches. You have people who are involved in different auxiliaries that separate themselves from other people within those settings. Money does it, education does it. Right now, one of the most dangerous things I think that we face in terms of dealing with what's spiritual, I see a resurgence in African American separation based on education. We have a generation who's coming up now who is beginning to revert to what it once was. If you had an education, you were separate from those people who were blue-collar workers or who did not have one. There's a resurgence of that taking place, and that's very, very dangerous. It's being perpetuated by virtue of people with education separating themselves on the basis of economics and segregating themselves from the masses of people and not seeing the problems that's actually taking place in the communities. For example, I've sat with African American, I almost said kids, but they're adults younger than me, and I've heard some of the same things now that I heard back in the day when I was involved in the 60s. Yeah, the issues of, I tell you one of them, the issues of unions. The issues of unions, well, it's the same thing it was back in the 60s. Those who were in corporate positions see unions as a bad thing. When it's unions that has actually developed or built the middle class and gave them an opportunity to get the education that they got. They have no push for the single payer system in the insurance industry because they have insurance. So they really don't care. This is the same thing that we saw 30 years or 40 years ago in that system. And that this in itself is once again having the surges up. But the difference is this. One of the differences is that there were more people on a broader scale, older than we were, who were in the church, who were looking for a way out and beginning to develop this concept of civil rights and moving to the streets to fight it. But there was also those kids who were in college who were not in the church, who were standing in the forefront of civil rights. That's not happening now. That's not happening. Right now what we see happening is a separation from the church, a separation from a belief system that involves anything spiritual. Only do it when it's convenient, but at the same time, a move towards I got to get mine, and if you get yours, fine. If you don't, it's okay. That's the kind of thing that we have to combat. I listen at people who are in positions of authority make statements like the government can't take care of everybody. Well, nobody's asking for that. But I also hear people who are in, and I say people, young people who are in these positions of corporate positions, talking about the deficit is too high for the government to be dealing with single-payer systems in the church. Are you crazy? The very people who are in the Congress who are saying these things and pushing these ideas that these people are picking up on have better insurance than anybody.
If they're rich, they don't even need it.
Right. So we are beginning to see a subtle wedge being pushed between what can be called the haves and have-nots. And we have to deal with that.
Subtle.
Well, I guess it's subtle up to now. Yeah.
But I agree with it. I remember hearing it. It stuck with me. Oh, we have to raise our hand?
Okay.
Well, I'm going to another church. Y'all progressing way past me. Well, yeah, I remember being taken by, you know how you get those phrases that stick in your head. Years ago, reading.
Thank you, man.
Somebody said that what's really happening is it's not a matter of broadening the basic equality or availability of services for all. More and more, it seems like in this modern area, people are saying, I want into that other group. Right? So I want into the 1%.
Yeah.
It's not that I want the 1% to share their wealth
That's
with
it.
the other, a greater portion of the 98, 99%. And that's what I think is happening. And it's easy to see how you can be co-opted into that if you're buying into the material comfort part of it.
And I'll tell you something that we missed.
That's the big fight.
The concepts that the Tea Party were projecting are the same concepts that the occupiers were projecting. The 1% co-opted the Tea Party and moved them in a totally different direction. And that's why they began to lose a lot of their membership. Because a lot of the same principles that they were projecting were principles about lobbyists, big corporations manipulating the government, just a number of things. Now, everything was not synonymous with occupiers, but the basic concept of limiting the influence of corporations was. Janice.
It's kind of hard to articulate, but I feel like it's one thing for those powers to have control of the financial markets or, you know, even the government in a way, but it seems so much worse that they are the only ideas that people are attaching to. You know, when they have control of the thought, how on earth can people get free from that? How can we change it fundamentally if no one can think past what they're being fed, essentially?
Let me ask you a question, Janice. Are you able to think past what you're being fed?
Yes, but I'm here.
Okay, now you're able to think past what you're being fed, which means that there are people who people are able to do that. The question is whether or not they choose to do that. The bottom line is this. When Richard made the statement about the desire to move into the 1%, and you make it about controlling thoughts, the bottom line is this: selfishness. Selfishness. People allow themselves to be controlled and manipulated if they can get what they want. Richard?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I see that in externalization of violence, all that stuff, and we talk in here enough. That comes from lack of self-knowledge. You know, it's all back to that, to thine own self be true part. Where's your comfort, ease, calmness come from? So if you don't have that base, and if there's nothing being done to help you find that base, then this is the way it's going to play out.
And I agree with that. And see, that is the reason we have to have a total paradigm shift when we start talking about God, Christianity, religion, spirituality. We want to separate those things from thought control, economics, social climbing. You can't separate that. You can't separate that. And we look in the scriptures looking for God. When the scriptures simply talk about how we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and how we are, I got you back, and how we're supposed to be in terms of be in terms of creators, Elohim, and all the things that we are talking about that are manipulative have been created by men. So if it's been created by men, then when you see that, you find the weaknesses in it, you discuss it, and by virtue of being here, we are actually putting things in the macro. Mm-hmm. Regina.
Keep going because I'm still formulating the question.
Okay, we're actually putting things in the macro, and people can pick up on them. And if we believe that we are able to influence simply by presence of thought, then we must begin to direct our thoughts. We must begin to make sure that the things that we speak are in line with what's in the book. And I don't mean quoting the scriptures by any means, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about conceptually. Our lives must be guided conceptually so that everything that we do is geared toward being messianic. I mean, think about it this way: if you want to look into the book and you want to see what Jesus did, you want to follow his footsteps, everything he did after the encounters that he had at 12 led him on that journey. And keep in mind, these numbers in his life are totally different than his age and the number of years he did ministry. Mean much more than that. But what his whole life was geared toward changing the thought patterns of mankind. And it was not about him developing a foundational belief that was going to bring people together on Sunday morning to have a good time. It was not about him projecting himself to be a leader so that when things go wrong in your life, Jesus go fix it. That was not it at all. It was him saying to everyone that this whole thing is not real. It's a creation that we have brought into being, and we have began to worship the thing that we created as opposed to the one who created us. And by worship, I mean surrender to. And when I think about the concept of surrendering, I don't consider the idea of giving up. When I think about surrendering to the one who created, I'm talking about allowing the aspirations and desires of the one who created us to become our aspirations and desires. Surrendering to that thought. Not giving up and quitting or being imprisoned by anything. That's not what I'm talking about when I talk about surrender. Not at all. And I'm talking about getting to the place where we realize that we are indeed thought, and that we are indeed spirit. We've talked about this before, but I want to reiterate it, that if we are not spiritual, then why is it that we are able to feel each other's presence? You can feel someone walk into your room. If someone, why is it that if I touch Barbara's arm, she feels something different than if John touches her arm? The touches are the same, but the response is different, isn't it? Why? There has to be a spiritual connection there. There has to be something deeper than this physical being that we are. And what we have done, we have engaged so deeply into intellectualizing everything until we have pushed spirit out. And we are actually getting to the place where theologians are the ones who don't believe in God. And the scientists are the ones who've proven that God does exist. I mean, it's crazy, but that's where we are. Theologians, for the most part, don't have a clue as to who God is. And when you begin to look at the thoughts that are being projected by the theologian, it's all about taking care of you.
I think from everything that's been said today, and the way or the direction that religion started and took spirituality, and talking about how we see great selfishness among people today, I think that's just actually because of how religion is. It goes totally against altruism, and it has been a steady degeneration of that because of the lack of spirituality.
See,
because it's impossible to be altruistic without being spiritual.
You don't recognize it. You don't have to recognize it's spiritual, but it is.
Yes.
It is. Now, the other thing is this. It depends on your reason for being altruistic.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's what I mean. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and I can explain it a little further. And what I mean by religion is what religion actually teaches you by the nature of it goes totally against being altruistic, because you are doing it for some selfish reason.
For something in return.
Or you are being told that you need to do this, this is right, this is moral. So when you're told to do something without there being a reason, just that this is how it is supposed to be done and this is you being good when you do it, it totally takes the spiritual part out of it. Because now you're doing it because you're being told to do it, and you're almost a robot.
So we're going to Belize to build some houses, so we can talk about the mission trip we're on, as opposed to...
And then you don't even want to be there. The only reason you're there so you can go back and you can brag about doing it or something like that. You're not doing it at all, literally, for the people and humanity or mankind or anything like that.
That's why most people are philanthropic. Tax deductions, named on buildings, hospital wings. It's not because of a spiritual desire to do the right thing. It's for self-aggrandizement.
Or just my religion told me this is what I'm supposed to do in order to get some reward.
So you hear what he's saying. So if your religion tells you that you're supposed to do this to get a reward, right? Let me put a pin in that. That's the reason people go to church. Because heaven is the reward.
That's the reason why they don't or try not to at least indulge in what is called sin.
Because they want something in return. See, let me, if I may, expand this a little bit further on this idea of going to church to get to heaven. If I tell you that coming here is going to get you to heaven, then heaven is always out of reach. But if I look in the scriptures and see that Shamayim, the idea of heaven talks about enlightenment or being aware of who you are, if I look at that and I see that the life of enlightenment is olive, the divine essence, if I see that and then I teach you that this is who you are, now heaven is not out there. Heaven is right here in terms of the enlightenment. So now your paradigm began to shift. So now whatever you do it because it's right, not seeking a reward. And you do it without even giving thought to it because that's who you have become. You know, I don't have to sit back and think whether I'm going to be nice to you or not, Janice. I don't have to sit back and think if ever come out of her mouth wrong, I'm going to be nice to her. I don't have to think about that. That's just who we are. Janice.
I'd like to go over the pearly gates and the streets paved with gold and all that someday.
Oh, okay. Okay. Then that is it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But all of that does mean something.
Yeah.
It truly does mean something. Because when you think about, when you even think about a pearl period, you think about it comes from an irritant and a crustacean, and that the Jews did not even eat. You see, so it does mean something.
Where did it come from? Is that what you're asking?
She wanted us to talk about the whole idea of what it means.
Well,
The esoteric meaning of
the
it.
two things I thought about were
Revelation.
the gold, and that's a very conducive metal, right?
Yeah.
And streets and thoughts. So I'm thinking about connection and
It's journeys, and gates are representative of entering different, I won't use the term level, but different places of understanding. In terms of being in this place where we were last year of understanding, and entering a gate, being in another place of understanding at this juncture. Like the gates we talked about in 11:11:11. Transcending the elementary thoughts that we have been entertaining and seeking to live by. See, this is what I truly believe. It doesn't matter how much you study the scriptures, whether it be from the Greek, the Aramaic, or the Hebrew, or whatever. It doesn't matter how much you study it. If your desires are not pure, you're only going to end up with physical, material understanding. How do I arrive at that? Because if you read the writings of a Sufi and you read the writings of a sage, they may be studying different books, but they arrive at the same place of understanding spiritually. But on the levels what we deal with it, on the material level, they're always at odds with each other. Always. My holy book is better than your holy book. My God can beat up your God. That kind of thing. And the whole ignorance of it all Allah is not God when Allah in Arabic is Elohim in Hebrew. I mean, come on. You know, so it's the whole ignorance of it all when you're dealing with it on a material plane. So it has to transcend that. And the transcendency does not occur unless the desire is pure. Now, this is the other kicker about that. Regardless of how pure the desire is, it will attract people who seek purity, not for the sake of being pure in terms of thought, but for the sake of being able to articulate a belief that someone else can't articulate. They don't want to change. They don't want to change. They want to be who they are, but know more about it than everybody else. And as a result of that, they don't change. See, we can talk about material concept of the cosmos all we want to. We can talk about the idea of what numbers mean all we desire. We can even talk about what the letters mean. But without a correct motive, all we're doing is present information. Information doesn't change you. Yes.
And you just brought it back to the thought I was having as we were talking about like the generation of individuals you said who are kind of in a different place. I think like the privilege has bred an ignorance. And by that I mean like there is no understanding at all of what the true seat of them being in the positions that they are is all about. And so when Janice was talking about, you know, the concept that a lot of people don't see beyond trying to be a part of the 1%, it's like they don't even have a concept of what the wealth means. And so missing a lot of time from educational experiences is this this generation of a concept of how do we even create an establishment.
What do you mean by that?
Like the reason why we all are sitting here and having this conversation right now because we are in agreement that it needs to be done.
Right.
There isn't that kind of thing put out there, whether it's the other religious institutions or it's the academic institutions.
Well, the academic institutions are about thought control because the corporation control them.
Yeah,
going to school now is about getting a job.
Yeah.
It's not about learning. You know, when I came through, we just learned. You know, it was about learning. It was about understanding. It was about, for example, I did an in-depth study on the Japanese economic system because I wanted to understand the nature of the Japanese in terms of how things moved from World War II to where they were at that time. That kind of thought is not present now because kids are looking for how much money they're going to make when they graduate as opposed to trying to understand the comparative concepts from different cultures. We have changed the language that they speak, and I say we not by virtue of me as an individual. The language that is spoken is one of economics. That's what we believe. Think about it this way. The reason they're having a problem in Spain right now is not because they don't have any money. That's not it. It's not the problem in Greece is not because they don't have any money. The problem is because they're paying the bondholders. That's the problem. The banks are calling the names. That's the problem.
And the shops.
Yeah. So those are the issues. Everything is about the dollar. So we have to have a paradigm shift in terms of the direction of our thoughts. When we came through in terms of what we call the civil rights thing, it was a material civil movement. But now it's beginning to morph into a spiritual movement. that is the reason we have dealt so intently with racism. Because racism has to be seen for what it is. A spiritual effort to separate on the basis of skin color that has nothing to do with the essence of a man anyway. So we have to change that.
Well, I'm just going to, forgive me, but I'll accept what you say if you're talking about what's in the mainstream.
Yes, I am.
If you're talking about CNN.
No.
No, but just,
I'm talking about the mainstream.
Just by metaphor. Because, I mean, when you turn me on to Link TV, shame on you, you realize that there are, because of other avenues, there is an awful lot of other that's out there, but it's not going to find its way very easily into the mainstream because of all these other pressures, the superficiality to be maintained, etc. But I guess I have a son who's interested in economics, and I would say the difference between when I studied economics and what he can do now is when I came up in the 60s, everything was simple, organized, the theories all worked, etc. Right? Now, and then for the last, then 20 years after that, you didn't know what was going on. Now, people are bringing up economic history. And to me, economic history is one of the more fascinating subjects to study because you understand how all the rules back then weren't employed in the manner in which they had you believe they were. Right? There were trade barriers all over, protectionism everywhere to seek advantage. That's not the way I understood the theory. So I think a lot of that research now has a platform, but it's not going to be mainstream. So the difficulty is everything is so scattered and you have to really go look and find. And I think even whether it tips into spiritual things. So the risk is that most people won't have the time, the energy, or they're not in a collectivity of friends and things that encourage them to pursue or say, you know, I read this, and then that stimulates something. So you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
It's there, but what's really insidious is it's not so easy to find unless it's your intent to keep searching, seeking, and take that journey.
And see,
it's there.
My thing,
it didn't used to be.
Maybe I had a bit of an advantage, I suppose, in that Ross and Kelsey's wife taught me economics. So we got just a lot of stuff from the inside that she got from her husband. But anyway, I don't think we have to do that. I don't think we have to seek that. I think all we have to do is seek the principles of the kingdom. That's it. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and righteousness, all these things will be added. That's my point is this. The whole mindset is to seek the material. Get comfortable with the material, and the spiritual you get later. I have a friend who never went to church and didn't really care that much about it, but got comfortable financially, and then started going to one of the, supreme churches in the area, and money churches. And now, all of a sudden, I'm grateful for what God has given me financially. You did that on your own. Don't do that now. So what I'm saying is that there has to be a shift in that. The goal is not the economics. The goal is the spiritual. The goal is not the material. The goal is the spiritual. And we are so afraid that if we seek the spiritual, we're going to lose something material. We do a just in case God thing. Our spiritual beliefs are just in case. Just in case this stuff is right, I'm going to hold on to it. But let me tell you something. You will never see the other world in terms of being here and seeing it. You will never experience the spiritual essence of who you are as long as you deal with it from a just-in-case perspective. You have to be all in or all out. It never said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, just in case the spiritual doesn't work. It didn't say that. It says, be all in or be all out. I simply trust what I have read in the book. I simply trust what I have experienced from the Creator. I simply trust that. And when I say I simply trust that, if I were not trusting that, then I would not be Him. If I would have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, I would be on the religious pathway that I started this journey on, and I would never enter that gate that allowed me to see the glorious beauty of the spiritual. I see the splendor of it all. I experience the splendor of it. So we have to, in some kind of a way, not be hindered by virtue of not being able to teach everybody, individually, but understand that because of the essence of our being, we don't have to individually teach everyone. We simply think it. We simply desire it. And we put it into the macro. It simply happens that way. But we have to rise above our selfish desires. We are majoring in minor stuff. When it comes to, I have to make sure that my retirement is taken care of. I have to make sure that my car is paid for. I have to make sure all these material things. If I truly believe what I say I believe, I trust that all of these things are dealt with in the time and the way that they are supposed to be dealt with. Let me show you something. We have been dealing with that building at Great Defense since last April. And we thought that we would have been in it during the summer. But things did not happen that way. So I stood before them and said that you know what, don't worry about it. Things happen the way they are supposed to. Every single time that we get a halt in construction, we just sit there and wait. Then something comes that's less than what we thought it was. For example, when they did all that stuff and telling us, they mean inspectors, telling what we had to do, it was like, oh my God, that was out of reach in terms of looking at the material. But from the spiritual perspective, we knew we had to do it. Now, we simple things that seemingly are simple. 1 week, we are looking at $3.51 for hardwood. The next week, we're looking at $1.50 from the same person in a better grade. 1 week, we're looking at, Craig goes up there to spray the ceiling, to prime it. And he cannot get this paint gun thingy to work that we got him for Christmas. He's been dying to use it, never used it before. And he can't seem to get all those parts together, right? This starts on Monday of last week. And I end up there, was it Thursday or Friday? I was in Thursday. I was in Gaffney all day, fooling with him. And finally, I got him the right hose and, got the stuff together for him. And I left to go get something else that he needed. And when I got back, the guys who were going to, blow the ceilings were there. And the guy told him, you can't use that as a primer. It's water-based. It's not going to hold. What's my point? All week long was designed to keep him from putting that water-based primer up so that he could put the right primer. You see what I'm talking about? It's the little things. And he was so frustrated, and I'm saying to him, listen, everything happens for a reason. You will see how this thing works out. So when it worked out that way Thursday, he says to me, I see. So if you trust that whatever takes place in your life, if you trust that whoever crosses your path in your life, these people, these situations, circumstances are there in order to perfect your journey. I believe that. My journey is not one of wealth in terms of materially. My journey is one of spiritual wealth in terms of understanding, in terms of seeing beyond this paradigm that we live in day in and day out. I believe that the essence of who we are actually dies. I don't mean die in terms of, destructive dying. Die in terms of needing to be resurrected. I believe the essence of who we are dies when we begin to see ourselves through the eyes of materialism. I believe that, and the reason I believe that so strongly is because when you begin to see everything through the eyes of materialism, you will do just about anything to get what you want, without regard to your fellow man. And honestly, I see that taking place in a lot of religious settings. Manipulating people with a building fund. Manipulating people to get what you want. Manipulating people in terms of don't question God. The only reason you say that because you don't have an answer yourself. Manipulating people in terms of the way the message is delivered, as opposed to granting them opportunity to question what you say when you say it. All of these things, I believe, are drowning the essence of who we are. It is killing the essence of who we are. But when we begin to expose ourselves, and what I mean by that is make ourselves vulnerable to our fellow man, then things begin to change. The resurrection of the spiritual takes place. Let me show you. Right now, when I walk in that door, or when Bob walks in that door, or when Sheldon walks in that door and takes a seat here, whoever walks through that door and sits here has said, I'm vulnerable. You expose all of your vulnerability, do you not? Because you don't know what's coming. You don't know how it's coming. But you trust what? You trust the essence of your being. Am I right about that?
Because every time there's a question that I can't answer, and like you can answer and I can't answer, you are already on the phone or something. But then like when you were not around, there hasn't been a question that I couldn't necessarily answer, or Ms. Barbara couldn't answer. I always got answers.
And that's what I'm about to say when we talk about this. You got to be in the essence. Whenever something needs to be refined, Barbara is always there. Always. To say it in terms that I can't articulate, but it happens.
Yeah, as soon as it goes to your head, I don't know, and then she just started talking.
That's what I'm talking about. So it's trusting the essence of who we are. It's not. If I were to say, okay, Janice, you're very smart, so you go teach. That's crazy. That's crazy.
But it happens.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
It does. It's crazy to believe that someone can do that simply because of their intellectual abilities. Mm-hmm. This is a totally different paradigm that we're dealing with. And when we began to look at it and deal with it from that perspective, guess what? I'm sitting here. But at the moment that I am sitting here, what's coming through my mouth, being filtered through my heart, is not just coming from me.
Yeah, because
I'm drawing.
Because you don't even know it when like a moments before the question is asked and you give the answer, whatever you're led to actually give, it is unknown by yourself.
Right. You're absolutely right. Because there are many, many times when questions come, I just start talking. Because I trust the essence of who I am. More importantly, I trust the essence of who the Adam is. I trust that. And I don't particularly like using the term man. Because that Adam that was translated as man and Ish that was translated as man really takes the, come on, help me, the fire, the life out of it. When we say man, this is what we see, individuals. You see? Yeah. But when we talk about the Adam, we don't know what we see. When we talk about Ish, we don't know what we see. But we have to develop that kind of spiritual vision to be able to see the essence of who we are and the essence of the direction in which we travel. so as to be able to influence mankind on a broader scale than just influencing, thinking that we influence just this room. If I thought for a moment we were only influencing this room, or whoever's watching, live, or whoever's on the phone, then it would be a serious waste of time.
Okay.
It would be a serious. What I'm saying is that because they wouldn't go any further than us. And when we look at us as individuals, we see ourselves as being too small a group to change.
It sounds like you were thinking of some other things you could be doing right now.
Yeah. But when you begin to see the essence of your being, then all of it makes sense. The purpose for coming together is to put in the macro the essence of who we are, so we can begin to move away from this individual stance and begin to incorporate the oneness that we are, or the oneness that we represent. What is it? Okay.
I noticed a parallel when you were talking about, I'm not sure if I'm using the right sense in the terms that you use man, but man being only interested in the material, and in only being interested in the material, being focused on the material, actually is degrading what the essence of man, which is the same exact thing that man did to God as well, by trying to make God into a material being.
Well, right. You're right. Because what is it, at the 8th Psalm that says that you have lowered yourself beneath Elohim, beneath who you are? You've done that. That's,
And anytime you are only focused on material, you have already lowered yourself, just because for the essence of who you truly are, material is absolutely nothing.
It really isn't. If you live in the exoteric all your life, you never understand the esoteric. And I'm saying that at some point, we have to move beyond this plane of the exoteric and begin to look at the esoteric. When we dealt with racism in the beginning to us was exoteric. It was material. It was on this plane that we live on materially. But when we began to look at the reality of racism, we began to see that it is more of a spiritual, it has more of a spiritual essence. And the reason it's so powerful is because the very ones who are perpetuating or fighting racism are the same people. They are the same. They are one and the same. There's no difference in the two. So it's like fighting against yourself. And when you fight against self, you never win. The battle is never over. You can't run from the battle. You can't hide from the battle because you're always there. So when we begin to see it from that perspective, it is then that we begin to move more into the esoteric and see with the eye rather than the eyes.
And you keep saying surrender, and you didn't want people to think that means just give in. So I'm just saying it. When you say surrender, you mean more so as someone, let's say a prisoner who is institutionalized. Surrender is to actually open up your mind and leave that state of living in that small prison to all that there is. That's what you mean by surrender.
Yeah, coming under the influence of who you are, as opposed to being influenced by who.
A very, very narrow, defined person.
Yeah.
Well, what you're giving up is that narrowly defined person, that really small world that you created for yourself that has no room for who you are.
Okay, I can see that.
Yes.
Yeah. Not only doesn't have room, it has no desire for who you are. Because by virtue of you coming to that realization, that small world dissipates.
So have we been doing all this, all that we've been doing all this time is trying to commit spiritual suicide?
Yeah.
By staying in what Denise says is that little small world that we created. We give up the essence of who we truly are are trying to box who we are
Yes.
into this magician's box.
I see more parallels too. It's the same exact thing. It's the same thing when people are actually just after pretty much money, and you become an expert in a particular field. And so when you start off your life as a child, you have all these different talents to yourself, but you focus on one thing. So who you become is just that one thing, and that is your life. You see everything in terms of whatever you're an expert in or you have studied, but you did it only for the purpose of getting money. And also something that I just saw recently that goes along with this, with just only being concerned when you were talking about the schooling. Hackers are always better than anyone who the government employs as far as computer technology is concerned. It's a big difference. The reason why this person that usually typically goes to the government and will follow rules and has order and things like that is the person that has gone to school to learn these things, and they only have learned what the school has taught them, but their only purpose for learning that information was to for occupation to make money. The true hacker, whether he is doing something malicious or benevolent, has started this off at around the age 9 or 10 of building programs and things like that. He is not driven by a dollar at all to learn this stuff. He is simply truly fascinated in it. So he is going to learn more things that is being taught that even the people at the schools who are teaching knows. He is learning all this on his own.
And I'll crack the code simply because you told me I couldn't.
I guess you saw the movie Girl with the Dragon Tattoo?
Well, I saw, that's not where that came from. This is actually what real hackers. But yes, now that you say that, that is true.
That's why the establishment wants to buy that hacker.
Yeah, but exactly. and that's also the reason why that hacker will not work for the government. Well, what has actually been taking place is those hackers won't work for the government just because you're not about to tell me what to do.
Well, I'm not going to hack into. I'm not going to hack into the Chinese system just because you want me to, because that's what they want me to do.
Yeah.
Now, but see, the other part of that is this: you wouldn't have that sitting on your lap if somebody had not walked away from school to Apple.
Mm-hmm.
You see, that's where it came from. I do understand from that, and I think I've said this. I have said this to you before. That I remember crying out to the Creator about me going to seminary, and what I heard was, "You will not go to seminary. I will teach you." Now, I think I would have been limited to a degree, but I think that I'm too inquisitive to have been co-opted by that system. I'm too rebellious, maybe I should say that, to have been co-opted by that system. If I had done that, would we be where we are? Would we? No. So it takes, I guess what I'm trying to say is this. It's not enough to think outside of the box. You got to learn to live outside of the box. Because you are in this world, but not of this world. What is the box?
There's no box. That's the truth. The illusion is the box.
Oh, yeah, the illusion is the box.
Because a little earlier, a little earlier, Barb was, sorry, raise my hand. Which you didn't do 3 times. Well, Barb was saying we commit suicide. The thought that came into my immediately was, that's the joke. It's not a joke. You can't commit suicide. It's the illusion of self-destruction. If Einstein's right, and if you translate E equals mc squared on a spiritual level, you can't.
And you're right, and that's what I'm talking about when I talk about the death of your essence not being the destruction of it. Is you're not being aware of it. It's still there.
Yeah.
It's there, but when you begin to resurrect it, it actually gives you a sense of the life that not that you have, but that you are. One of the things that was most fascinating to me is when I read the book, what's that book? You know, the thick book with the blue cover.
Old Atlas.
Source field investigations, yeah.
That is a thick.
You know what? At least the people understand what I'm talking about. You know you well enough, right? But when I read that, what really fascinated me was more than anything in that book. The one thing that fascinated me was the idea of plants having feelings. And even after you cook the vegetable, it still has feelings. That was one of the most fascinating things to me. And it led me along the journey of thought. Where does this life come from? If you can boil vegetables after cutting them up and they still have life, this life of everything that is has to come from the life of the Creator. Come from the Creator who is life. And if we are that image, that's the life that we are. So no matter how hard we try to destroy this life with pesticides, with hot water, with knives, no matter how hard we try to destroy it, it doesn't happen. Because these plants are simply representative of our thoughts. The life in them is not the plant. The thing that we see is representative of our thoughts. And it was fascinating to me because, not only because of that life being impossible to destroy, but also because it was not a religious organization or setting that came to this realization. It wasn't a theologian who came to this understanding. That to me is simply fascinating, because we've been brought to believe, and I don't mean we in terms of just in the setting, we as a people have been brought to a place of believing that if you want to understand what life is, go to church. I mean, that's what we've been taught. When we really find out, if you want to know what death is, you go to church. Or unawareness is, you go to church. And I don't mean death in the sense of destruction. I mean being unawares. Because we are constantly brought to a deeper state of being, unaware. So it's like people have known, talking to plants, they're healthier. People have known that. But to the extent that this has been carried, I've never heard that before. And it was extremely.
The plants?
What?
About the plants?
About them having feelings after you cook them.
And even communicating,
communicating
across
their feelings.
Across the world as well, just by having a thought about that plant, and that is actually a measurable effect on that plant when that thought takes place.
Okay, I'll buy the cooking part, but the other stuff's been around.
Oh no, I was just talking about all they were
talking
talking about
really
the plant.
been around.
Well, I mean, I was trying to stay awake in the 70s. It was there.
I wasn't born in the 70s.
I think what I find interesting about this is, and maybe it's a little bit of perspective because of where I am or whatever, or where I've been before, and that's not to say anything other than just a lot of stuff is going on in the world, and we just think the whole world is us.
Mm-hmm.
That is, and I'll borrow a phrase from that movie Four Feathers or whatever it is, and it was set against the British, but I'd say it about the Americans. You Americans, you walk too heavily on this planet. You just think it's all about you.
Well,
but there's a lot of that other stuff that's surviving out there. In fact, some of it's getting organized, and the day may be coming where we wake up one day and find out it ain't about us anymore, which we've been left behind.
Well, first of all, that's one of the mechanisms of manipulation and control. Everything is about America. Nobody really cares about the floods in Australia. Everything is about us. And when moves beyond being about us. It only goes as far as Great Britain. It doesn't even go into all of Europe, just Britain.
Or like Sheldon was saying, if you have the opportunity to give so that you can be acknowledged, that's when the care is projected somewhere else. Like, you know, oh, look at us doing these things.
We feed the world. But why do you feed the world? So you can take what the world has. Yeah, it's like me coming into your house, taking food out of your pantry and selling it. And then you get upset with me because I'm selling the food from your pantry. And my government comes in and tells you that's his food because he found it. And you going to rebel against me taking your food out of your pantry, and my government shoots you. Now you're going to take everybody's food out of the pantry. But that's the essence of what happens, is it not? It's all about what we want, and that's what we have to change. We have to do it from an understanding that economics represents something spiritual. When Janice was talking about, was it you, Virginia? One of you were talking about we don't understand what wealth is. You know, the whole idea of the wealth question is not represented by material things. It's spiritual. I got you. It's spiritual. I thought I saw your hand earlier, but spiritual awareness. The idea of government, because government is all about who can do what. Control and manipulate power.
Yes.
Whoever can accumulate the most.
Government has monopoly over the power to use force.
So
violence.
Spiritual government is about what? Power. For as many as believed on his name gave you the power to become the sons of God. For as many as believed, for as many as had confidence in the essence of his being or in the light of his being, they also became rays of light. That's what they're saying. They have the authority to become rays of light. That's what that scripture is talking about. But you have to trust what you see first. And I don't mean seeing, in the material world.
Couple of things. You're talking about the plants. I've kind of gotten to the hobby with plants here recently. And what you're talking about, they have life. It seems to appear that you can't destroy them either. And even if you're willing to give them time, and we think about when the fires go through and you come back, the life is more plentiful in the forest than it is before the fire, which seemed to, outwardly, to have destroyed everything. But even with plants, I noticed regardless, you give them a year, and they look dormant, and eventually whenever they're ready, given the nurture, they're going to come back. They're never really destroyed. They're just outwardly, we give up on them. The other thing was, you're talking about the government. I was reading some information, and this is strictly mental stuff, how authority given to people you're talking about the pantry. I was surprised to see that governments give schools the right to take over property if they wanted to establish a public school. And I thought that was just, I know that governments can do that if they want the right of way and you're there, they can take over your house. But I didn't realize that schools could do something like that they could take over. If they wanted to put a school here, they can take over the property.
But that's a part of the government. That's part of the police powers of the government. Yeah. So it's, and again, I want us to back up and understand that information doesn't change us. It doesn't.
And let me say one thing when you say that, and this is the key part. I have the exact definition. The state is an entity which successfully claims a monopoly on the legitimate use of violence. So that is successfully claims as in people actually give up their rights or more so to basically agree that this is what this entity can do.
The use of what?
It is an entity which successfully claims a monopoly on the legitimate use of violence.
Of violence.
I immediately thought you could take that same definition, change a few words, and you have the difference between a cult and a church.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about successful
control.
Yes.
You
fill in the blanks.
Well,
And you're
Janice said
legitimate
it.
something now, you're not.
Successfully
Yeah.
control the thoughts of people.
Yeah.
That's what it
Yeah.
was at. Sure.
But the other thing that you said earlier, you were talking about power and violence. And then you talked about power from the spiritual perspective, but it's never with violence. It's with love or, I mean, so it's like one is the mirror or the counterfeit of the other.
Because another thing that I actually was thinking about this week is it actually takes work to do this type of thing, to confine anyone, to successfully get them to basically give in to you or your thoughts, to control them with their thoughts and all these other things. It takes a lot of energy, and it's actually also unnatural to hate, be angry. It takes work, actual work, to do all these things, but we have got accustomed to do it. But to actually love someone and to be caring and all these other things, it is also a feeling of you letting go and not being restricted or trying to hold yourself almost tight. So that is actually more natural and almost of the essence of what we essentially are or meant to be, or just what we are.
I mean, look how miserable you are when you're mad at somebody. That's not natural. I'm going to do a thing on how you are supposed to govern your body. You determine what happens in your body. And what I'm beginning to see in my quest to understand it is that all of the energy that you put into controlling or manipulating or being an adversary are the things that brings your body to a place of weakness. You are doing that to your body. And the more enlightenment that you have, the less you have issues with your body. Because now this only happens when you become aware that you and your body are not the same.
Yeah.
That's when it begins to happen. When you become conscious of this being your body, your meaning, you being spiritual, right? You being Elohim. And this is the body that you have created to be in. When you become conscious of that, the more aware you become of that, and the more you seek to live continuously from the other world, the less problems you have with this body. The problems that you have with this body are created by you, and the problems that are created by you are the distractions. Sickness is a distraction. A broke foot is a distraction. If we are able to understand this, that the adversarial, the adverse energy that we put out has an effect on the body, then what is the adverse energy? All that's a distraction as well. So what happens to the body is simply a manifestation of what's taking place in the other realm. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a manifestation of that, and it's like it's like the baby that comes from the womb of a female is a manifestation of the male and female energies producing after its own kind. It's just a physical manifestation of that. And we have to, and that is one of the reasons, rather, that we have to cease our, and again, I'm not just talking about people in this room, I'm talking about man. We have to cease all the efforts that's put into discrediting, destroying, and dehumanizing people who have other sexual desires other than heterosexual. We have to stop demonizing that. We have to begin to seek rather, to understand, seek to understand as opposed to being destructive about it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If you notice, when people began to talk about what they are against, it's very, very difficult for them to justify it. For example, the people the conservatives who are against homosexuality, right? Look at Newt and look at Cheney. I mean, you see?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen when Santorum's daughter began to take birth control pills?
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to evict her? You know, or when he finds out, she may be already doing it, you don't know. But you know, those are the kinds of things that seem minor, but they can become major. We have to, because what it is, they're representative of a thought pattern that has as its desire to control thoughts. That's the pattern that's put out there. When you begin you cannot legislate morals. You can't legislate desires. I cannot change you through legislating laws. Neither can I change you by giving you information. You change because you, number one, have a desire to. And the thing that brings that desire to fruition is understanding the direction that you desire to go in. That's the thing that begins to change. The old adage, money changes people.
Mm-hmm.
Money doesn't change anyone. Money brings out what's there. It gives you courage, like alcohol. You know, the dude in school who could never talk to a girl until he started drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you want to know the true nature of an individual, give them a lot of money or take all their money away from them. How they respond to that is what's deeply inside of them. Think about it this way. The guy who kills himself because he loses his money is simply saying that the money is more important than his life, or more important than life itself. I'm about to end this, but I'm South Carolina is, oh my God, every time I think that, can nothing else come out here? It does. I mean, who would have thought that you would have that many Ponzi schemes in a state like this? Oh my God. I mean, it's like they're coming out of the woodwork. And I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. Who would have thought that you would have that? So that also goes to what we've been talking about earlier some time ago, maybe a couple of years ago, that South Carolina births the overwhelming majority of the darkness that we experience.
Since the inception of this country.
That's right. It births the darkness. And in order for South Carolina to birth the darkness, it has to nurture it. So it is no accident or it is no coincidence that we in South Carolina are seeking light, because light seeks darkness. So it can bring order to it. But you can't bring order to what's going on if you can't bring order to you. Because who you are is projected. No matter, you can be silent, and who you are is still projected. You don't have to speak a word. Last Monday night, I said, to my students, and God, my class is growing to the point where I got to get another table. I asked them, how many of you truly want to not only understand what's in this book, but to govern your lives accordingly? And naturally, nobody raised their hand because you don't think it's a trick question.
Everyone in here knows.
And I said, okay, this is not a trick question. This is real. So everyone with the exception of one person raised their hand. And I said, okay, so I say, Father, you have seen what has taken place here. So I ask you to grant this request by virtue of bringing circumstances and people across their pathway that they never thought would cross their path. And you could feel the Shekinah, the presence, just swept the room. And when they opened their eyes, it was something like, can I opt out? I don't like what I experienced just now. And the one who did not raise his hand was one who had been a pastor before. And he said to them, James said that to me, and I did it. And all hell broke loose. And I said, God, just take this with me. I won't do this no more. The thing is this, all hell did not break loose. The hell that's around you that you need to deal with manifested. It came into focus. It was already there. Mm-hmm. It just opened the eye, not the eyes, so you can see it. And you have to deal with that. Because if you don't deal with that, you will never perceive what heaven is. You will never see the light. Order must be brought. Order has to be brought. And I have never advertised the classes. I have never asked anyone to come to my class. I have never made an announcement that we're going to meet. Never done that. But people are studying coming. The question is why? Because there is a desire to move beyond the arena of religion and begin to understand what the arena of spirituality is all about. If I be lifted up, if I become the priority, I will draw all of Adam unto me. And the me is the essence of the Creator. Questions?
We've been talking about thought and thought control and things like that. And it's so easy for us to understand that from the physical perspective. And that's a spiritual thing. Thought control is a spiritual thing. From the music that plays, certain types of music that puts you in the mind frame to buy, things like that. On the one hand, we can accept that. And on the other hand, we don't accept the power of our thought. We can accept that somebody can control our thought on the one hand, and we can't accept the fact that we can control our own thought on the other. That's just...
Or even understanding why would they want to control your thought then if it has no real value.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah. They can do it, and I let them.
Mm-hmm. And the thought control manifests in the physical. I mean, think about it. Right after Thanksgiving, the Christmas music starts in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, the commercialization begins. Yeah, after Halloween. Yeah. Rich, I saw you.
No, I just wonder if it's not something related to the idea of. I mean, we're constructed in a rather complex way, socially, et cetera, so there's certain vulnerabilities to that kind of the community around us sort of thing. We have some needs to be touched, to feel part of, et cetera. On the other hand, knowing the strength and value of your own thought is I don't want to say it's a discipline, but it comes out of us, again, a sense of self-knowledge.
right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have that, you're more vulnerable to taking what the community tells you is of value.
And when you start controlling your own thought, you're rebellious.
Or you start questioning,
Yeah.
right? So that's why I think it's easier to give in to that externalized, the music and all that kind of stuff that's put in you, so to speak.
And I think that was the resistance, a lot of the resistance, even though it may not have been uttered during the 60s. People beginning to want to control their own thoughts. Their
Right.
own,
And even if it was clumsy
yeah.
and misdirected in some ways,
Right.
the struggle was valid.
And I think that was the beginning of the quest for the spiritual.
But I think, Barbara, even in our own lives, don't we get to a point where, don't you get kind of fed up of, I just don't need to go shopping anymore, I don't need to listen to all that
Yeah.
stuff anymore, you know what I mean? I've eaten enough food in my life, I'm tired of food, I bought enough clothes, I don't need all those clothes,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. And you do get to that place, but see, what happens is,
Doesn't mean you mean
we don't always recognize it. We call it, the older you get, the less things matter. When we should begin to understand it from the perspective that we are beginning to see that the spiritual is what matters, as opposed to the material. That's the most important. That's what matters. It doesn't matter. A classic example is this. The Lexus versus the Avalon. They're the same thing. The only difference is about 10 or 20 grand. You see, so that's thought control. And it is not about you doing something because you desire, even though you convince yourself you do. It's about what you project into other people. It's about projection. And the thing that my greatest desire for projection is that I project the essence of enlightenment. That's it. That's why it doesn't faze me when people come out their mouth wrong. If I say something and they say something like, I've said things and people come out of their mouth like, that's not the Bible. Or they come at me wrong, I don't even say nothing. And the reason I don't is because what I said is already out there. And whenever someone attacks you, it's because they fear you. If they're comfortable with you, if they feel superior to you, they won't attack you. So, having said all of this stuff today, our desire to control our own thoughts is also a desire to recognize that we are thought. There isn't a thought in anyone that's not in everyone. We are the same. I went from the beginning with the racism thing. You remember that? Mm-hmm. And I remember something last week that I hadn't incorporated into that, and that is the Eve gene. You know?
The what gene?
Eve.
Oh.
The gene that was found common to all men all over the world. Mm-hmm. All those came from the same womb. Mm-hmm. That gene. That's what I'm talking about. And understanding from that perspective changes the paradigm about race. It really does. It will help us to really see that race is about manifestation of different thoughts as opposed to the whole idea of skin color. And we have to bring those thoughts back under control so as to become the essence, thus eliminating all of these manifestations of separation.
Go ahead, Sheldon.
And racism is being in that box because racism is self-hate.
Richie told you it wasn't no box.
Racism is thinking. I know the haku you're talking about. Racism is thinking that you are in that box.
Yeah,
mentally putting yourself in that box by denying. Well, racism is just putting yourself in the box. Don't believe the box is there. I said believing the box is there.
But that's how you train an elephant, right?
You tie him to a stake when
Yeah,
he's
that's
young,
right.
and then you remove the string in the stake, and
He's still,
He's
he's
still,
still obedient.
yeah.
Well, can you speak more in the context than when you say that Black people represent like a spirituality?
I'm not going. I won't have time to go through all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the beginning, what happened is that when man experienced, when Adam experienced the fall, the idea of the fall was moving away from light. The manifestation of that is the darkness. And out of that darkness came all of the thoughts. And in search of the light, these thoughts began to manifest as different skin tones, and ended with the Caucasian. And and the Caucasian became the essence of that light that we were in search of. And the Caucasian came out of us, and we came out of the Caucasian. All of us are one entity, but we became rays of thought that began to manifest in different ways. If you really look at it, the enmity is between the African descent and the European descendants. The other races are manipulated or by the European descendant.
So there's a body of knowledge now that has acknowledged that there actually, once people started moving out of the Ethiopia-Kenya region, that there was a mixture with another being. And in science, they called it Neanderthal.
Yeah.
And that from there, you have still like now a divergence of two different types of people that started merging again. What does that mean? Because that is not the same lineage necessarily that you're talking about right now.
If I go back to it, it really is, because the thought is that from two wombs came all of mankind, from one man. When they come back together again, that's an effort to bring the thoughts together again. That's an effort to return to the place of beginning. That's what the effort is. But because of selfishness and because of a fear of death and a will to survive, mankind continues to move further and further away from his beginning. And as he moved further and further away from his beginning in terms of his thought, it also began to manifest physically in terms of him moving further and further away from it. And again, I don't have the time to go into it in detail, but no, it was the 17th, I believe it was, that I went into it in detail. My conclusion is that regardless of what you see with your eyes, or assume you see with your eyes, it is simply a manifestation of spiritual thought. That's what I'm saying. Therefore, the idea of racism is not an opportunity. It is a distraction designed to perpetuate the idea of separateness. Now, if we can understand it from the spiritual perspective and see that all of us are one, then we can begin to move away from that. For example, we have to stop talking about biracial children. That's crazy. And I've said it, but I realize, what the hell are you saying? We have to stop doing that. In actuality, it's a merging of thoughts. If the Caucasian descendant and the African descendant ever gets on the same page, it's over. In terms of all these illusions that we are, that we are perpetuating, it's over. And one of the things that's beginning to minimize that sense of separation. That's why racism now is rearing its head. It's out of desperation, because what's happening when the Caucasian descendant and the African descendant begin to come together, now you got to be racist towards your grandchild. At some point, that changes. So the thoughts are beginning to change. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So we have to see that we are one yet many, and we not different. We have created these images of being different, so as to perpetuate that separateness. And the reason it is so difficult to see the light that we are is because we have turned our back on it. And when I say we, I'm inclusive of what we call every race, every nation. And I went through the whole concept of nations as well, understanding that nation simply represents a defined culture, a defined set of thoughts, which gives rise to different cultures or different nations, as is termed in scriptures. So it does follow the line of spiritual development. And the funny thing about it is that it does not come out of Genesis. I mean, we stay in Genesis and we see it all right there. You don't have to go into the New Testament. You don't have to go into any of the books. You can stay right there in Genesis and find it all. It's right there. Richard.
I guess I'll go ahead and ask a question. I was just playing with my head a little bit. When I came in, you mentioned the term African American. Denise said Black American. Let me just ask the question. And I hope it's just as a result of dealing with those few times when you external things oblige someone to think of themselves that way. What's the most common or comfortable way to think of yourself?
Depends on where you are. I don't care.
Or what you're dealing with.
Now,
I find myself using both terms.
You call yourself Black American or African?
It depends on the situation.
Same answer.
yeah. See,
Same answer.
If it's, but just by contrast, and I think most of us would say the same thing in the same room. Latin American, Asian American, Native American, blah blah blah. This is the only one that has color in it.
and the reason is because it's the only one that was separated on the basis of color.
That's it. That's my point.
That's the reason.
The politics of the circumstance is not ethnic.
Because
it's not cultural. It's race.
race.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the reason I use African American probably is because back in the day, that's what we were pushing, to be called African American rather than black, because we saw black as being a color, and that's all, as opposed to being connected to a culture. So and again,
yeah, well, I think you were trying to argue for the validity of your roots, but the real political issue was never that.
I know now,
Yeah.
but you know then it was a different era.
No, it was self-actualization.
Right.
Now it's just the hard-nosed politics of it, which ain't got nothing to do about where you came from.
No, nothing at all. Regardless of where you came from, the politics is going to be the same. But that was the root of the whole thing with the African American. And in actuality, it didn't. These so-called civil rights leaders fought that we just need to call ourselves Americans.
I still have to get those things to you. You know, your previous lessons.
Oh yeah,
when I can get my computer to work.
Okay, well.
Or I'll just get one of those little what are those
jump drives.
Jump drives.
Well, okay. I'm really thinking what I'm gonna do is put it up. I think I am.
Did I give you hard copies?
I think you did, yeah.
Okay, good.
But I wanna put it up.
Because you might need to tweak those hard copies.
Yeah.
I didn't catch everything.
I might have a tweaker. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else? Okay.
It's our desire that the light of the truth and the truth of the light reminds us continually that every circumstance, every experience, every perceived adversity is designed to perfect us.
Amen.